One of the most intriguing unsolved crime cases is the disappearance of the Sodder children in 1945. The case involves a fire that destroyed the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, on Christmas Eve. It involves a tragic event that has led to numerous questions about whether the fire that destroyed the Sodder family home was truly accidental, or whether something far more sinister was at play. On Christmas Eve, 1945, the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, was destroyed by a fire. The blaze claimed the lives of 5 of the Sodder children, but despite the intense heat, no remains were ever found in the rubble, leading to widespread speculation that the children had been kidnapped rather than perishing in the fire. George Sodder and his wife Jenny had 10 children, ranging in age from 2 to 23. That fateful Christmas Eve, George and Jenny were hosting a family gathering, and some of the children had stayed up late to celebrate. At around 1 a.m., the house caught fire, and George and Jenny managed to escape the flames along with their 4 youngest children. However, 5 children, Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5, were still inside the house when the fire broke out. Despite frantic efforts to save them, the family was unable to reach the children in time. The fire completely destroyed the house, and when the fire department arrived, they found no remains of the children. There was only evidence of the house burning down to the foundation. The fire and the strange circumstances, unusual details. Several things about the fire seemed odd from the start. For one, the fire department's investigation suggested that the blaze had started in the attic, but no electrical faults were found in the wiring. Also, the phone line had mysteriously been cut, which delayed George's efforts to call for help. Additionally, some witnesses reported seeing a car parked near the house earlier in the night, which aroused suspicions that the fire might have been intentionally set. No remains found. The most perplexing part of the case was the fact that, despite the intense heat, no human remains were found. It would have been expected that even in a fire of that magnitude, some remains, whether bones, teeth, or other fragments, would have been left behind. But the family found only ashes and debris, leading them to question whether the children had actually died in the fire at all. Key theories and suspicion. Kidnapping theory. The most widely discussed theory is that the children were kidnapped before the fire was set. The Sodder family believed that the children had been taken and that the fire was deliberately started to cover up the crime. They suspected that someone had been targeting their family for some reason, and that the fire was part of a larger, sinister plot. The family believed that the children might have been abducted as part of a revenge scheme. George Sodder had a history of run-ins with local businessmen, and it's speculated that some individuals might have had a vendetta against him. Others believed that the fire was part of an effort to cover up the kidnapping, especially when it was found that the children's remains were never recovered. The phone line cut. The fact that the phone line had been deliberately cut before the fire spread further suspicion about the fire being a planned event. This made it harder for George to call for help, possibly giving the kidnappers time to escape with the children. The apparent inconsistencies. There were also some inconsistencies in the investigation. Local authorities were criticized for the way they handled the case, and many believed that the investigation was not thorough enough. Some speculated that law enforcement, or even local figures in positions of power, might have been involved or complicit in covering up the true nature of the crime. Witness accounts. Over the years, there were some individuals who came forward with information that further fueled the suspicion of foul play. For example, some claimed to have seen a group of people near the house around the time of the fire, and others said they saw the children in the days following the fire, which suggested that they might still be alive. The investigation and the search for answers. Despite numerous investigations, the case has never been definitively solved. The Sodder family never gave up hope, continuing to seek answers for the rest of their lives. They hired private investigators and even consulted with a professional to try to find their children, but their efforts were unsuccessful. The strange clue. One of the most unsettling developments occurred in 1949, when the family received an anonymous letter containing a photo of a young man with the note, "Louis Sodder, 9 years old. I love your hair." The boy in the photo resembled Louis, and the family was convinced that he might have been alive and living somewhere under a different name. This led to further theories that the children had been taken and raised by someone else. Despite the family's efforts, this lead never resulted in a breakthrough. The aftermath. As the years passed, the Sodder family continued to search for their missing children, but no conclusive evidence ever came to light. The family put up posters, hired private detectives, and even traveled across the country following up on various leads. But no remains were ever found, and no one was ever charged with any crime. The mystery surrounding the disappearance of the 5 Sodder children remains one of the most perplexing unsolved cases in American history. In 1967, the family put up a billboard with the photographs of the missing children and a plea for information, which remains a powerful symbol of their search for justice and closure. George Sodder passed away in 1969, and Jenny Sodder died in 1989, but the case remains unsolved to this day. The case of the Sodder children is a haunting and tragic example of an unsolved mystery that has captivated generations. The bizarre nature of the fire, the suspicious circumstances surrounding it, and the lack of any remains have left many people questioning whether the fire was truly accidental, or if the children were victims of a well-planned abduction that was covered up by a fire. To this day, the mystery of what happened to the Sodder children remains an open and chilling case, and their fate continues to haunt those who have studied their story. The Black Dahlia, or Elizabeth Short, is one of the most infamous murder cases in American history. Short spent the last 6 months of her life in Southern California, mostly in the Los Angeles area. Shortly before her death, she had been working as a waitress and rented a room behind the Florentine Gardens nightclub on Hollywood Boulevard. According to some sources, she had aspirations to be a film star, though she had no known acting jobs. Elizabeth Short was born on July 29, 1924, in the Hyde Park neighborhood of Boston, as a middle child of 5. Her father was a sailor, and her mother was a housewife. In 1927, they settled down in Medford, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston. By then, her father built miniature golf courses until he lost most of his savings in the 1929 stock market crash. Years later, in 1930, his car was found abandoned on the Charlestown Bridge, and it was assumed that he had jumped into the Charles River. Believing her husband to be deceased, Short's mother began working as a bookkeeper to support the family. Troubled by bronchitis and severe asthma attacks, Short had to undergo lung surgery at age 15, after which doctors suggested she periodically relocate to a milder climate to prevent further respiratory problems. Her mother sent her to spend winters with family friends in Miami, Florida, for the next 3 years. In late 1942, after 12 years of thinking her husband was dead, Short's mother received a letter with apology from her presumed deceased husband, which revealed that he was in fact alive and had started a new life in California. After some correspondence, later that year in December, at age 18, Short made the decision to relocate to Vallejo, California, and go living with her father, whom she had not seen since age 6. Arguments between Short and her father led to her moving out only a short time after moving in January 1943. Short took a job at the base exchange at Camp Cook near Lompoc, briefly dating and living with a U.S. Army Air Force sergeant who reportedly abused her. She left Lompoc in mid-1943 and moved to Santa Barbara, where she was arrested on September 23, 1943, for drinking at a local bar while underage. Juvenile authorities sent her back to Massachusetts, but instead she returned to Florida, making only occasional visits to her family near Boston. While in Florida, Short met Major Matthew Michael Gordon Jr., a decorated Army Air Force officer of the 2nd Air Commando Group, who was training for deployment to Southeast Asian Theater of World War II. Short later told friends that Gordon had proposed to marry in a letter, while he was recovering from injuries from a plane crash in India. She accepted his offer, but Gordon died in a second crash on August 10, 1945. Short was devastated. She wanted to marry badly. Due to her beauty, she received a lot of attention from men. For her, this was a welcome distraction. Her dream was in tatters, so she used the men to go out for dinner or to get a place to live. She spent the little money she earned as a waitress on her clothes and her appearance. Short thought it was extremely important to always look good. She was a natural beauty and groomed herself as such. She always dressed up with beautiful peep-toe heels and beautiful dresses. She really was a beauty for the eye. She preferred to wear black dresses, but honestly, what woman doesn't like to do this? Because she liked to wear black so much, she got her nickname, the Black Dahlia, posthumously, as newspapers of the period often nicknamed particularly lurid crimes. The term may have originated from a film noir murder mystery, The Blue Dahlia, which came out in 1946. In July 1946, Short relocated to Los Angeles to visit Army Air Force Lieutenant Joseph Gordon Fickling, an acquaintance from Florida, who was stationed at the Naval Reserve Air Base in Long Beach. From November to December of that year, she stayed in a small two-room apartment with 8 other women. They all shared the same ambitions to make it in Hollywood. She had to pay $1 per day for this. When she could no longer afford this, she moved to San Diego on December 8th. In San Diego, she meets Dorothy French, after she wakes her up when Short is sleeping on the seats of the theater where Dorothy works. Short tells Dorothy that she has just left Hollywood and is suddenly homeless. This sweet woman offers Short a place to sleep. Dorothy lives with her mother and brother in Pacific Beach near San Diego. There she stays for a while. In the meantime, she had met a man, Robert Manley. The only problem was that Robert was actually married and had a 4-month-old child. Her living situation was not ideal. Dorothy's mother had enough of Elizabeth's not working, only partying life. They had offered her a place to stay and Elizabeth did nothing in return. So they told her she could no longer stay there. On January 9, 1947, Short returned to Los Angeles with Robert "Red" Manley. She had asked him to give her a ride. Manley stated that he dropped Short off at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, and that Short was to meet her sister, who was visiting from Boston, that afternoon. By some accounts, staff of the Biltmore recalled having seen Short using the lobby telephone. Shortly after, she was allegedly seen by patrons of the Crown Grill Cocktail Lounge at 754 South Olive Street. After that night, she disappeared, and she would never been seen alive after that night. On January 15, 1947, the body of 22-year-old Elizabeth Short was discovered. Short's naked body, severed into 2 pieces, and gruesomely mutilated, was found in a vacant lot on the west side of South Norton Avenue, midway between Coliseum Street and West 39th Street. The discovery left a shocking impression on the community. Short's severely mutilated body was completely severed at the waist and drained of blood, leaving her skin a pallid white. Autopsy determined that she had been dead for around 10 hours prior to the discovery, leaving her time of death either sometime during the evening of January 14th or the early morning hours of January 15th. The body had apparently been washed by the killer. Short's face had been slashed from the corners of her mouth to her ears, creating an effect known as the Joker smile. She had several cuts on her thigh and breasts, where entire portions of flesh had been sliced away. The lower half of her body was positioned a foot away from the upper, and her intestines had been tucked neatly beneath her buttocks. The corpse had been posed, with her hands over her head, her elbows bent at right angles, and her legs spread apart. Near the body, detectives located a heel print on the ground amid the tire tracks, and a cement sack containing watery blood was also found nearby. An autopsy of Short's body was performed on January 16, 1947, by Frederick Newbar, the Los Angeles County coroner. Newbar's autopsy report stated that Short was 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighed 115 pounds, and had light blue eyes, brown hair, and badly decayed teeth. There were ligature marks on her ankles, wrists, and neck, and an irregular laceration with superficial tissue loss on her right breast. Newbar also noted superficial lacerations on the right forearm, left upper arm, and the lower left side of the chest. The body had been cut completely in half by a technique taught in the 1930s called a hemicorporectomy. The lower half of her body had been removed by transecting the lumbar spine between the second and third lumbar vertebrae, thus severing the intestine at the duodenum. Newbar's report noted very little bruising along the incision line, suggesting it had been performed after death. Another gaping laceration, measuring more than 4 inches, ran longitudinally from the umbilicus to the suprapubic region. The lacerations on each side of the face, which extended from the corners of the lips, were measured at 3 inches on the right side of the face, and 2.5 inches on the left. The skull was not fractured, but there was bruising noted on the front and right side of her scalp, with a small amount of bleeding in the subarachnoid space on the right side, consistent with blows to the head. The cause of death was determined to be hemorrhaging from the lacerations to her face and the shock from blows to the head and face. Newbar noted that Short's anal canal was dilated almost 2 inches, suggesting that she might have been taken advantage of. Samples were taken from her body testing for the presence of sperm, but the results came back negative. Short was identified after her fingerprints were sent to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Her fingerprints were on file from her 1943 arrest. Immediately following Short's identification, reporters from William Randolph Hearst's Los Angeles Examiner made a disgusting choice by contacting her mother, Phoebe Short, in Boston, and told her that her daughter had won a beauty contest. It was only after prying as much personal information as they could from Phoebe that the reporters revealed that her daughter had in fact been murdered. Elizabeth Short was a young woman who had moved to Los Angeles with dreams of an acting career. She was often seen around the city and had a mysterious allure. The police received thousands of tips, but the case remained unsolved. The media played a significant role in spreading her story, leading to massive publicity and speculation about the murderer. On January 21, 1947, a person claiming to be Short's killer placed a phone call to the office of James Richardson, the editor of the Examiner, congratulating Richardson on the newspaper's coverage of the case and stating he planned on eventually turning himself in, but not before allowing police to pursue him further. Additionally, the caller told Richardson to expect some souvenirs of Short in the mail. On January 24th, a suspicious envelope was discovered, addressed to the Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers, with individual words that had been cut and pasted from newspaper clippings. Additionally, a large message on the face of the envelope read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings." The envelope contained Short's birth certificate, business cards, photographs, names written on pieces of paper, and an address book with the name Mark Hansen embossed on the cover. The packet had been carefully cleaned with gasoline, similarly to Short's body, which led police to suspect the packet had been sent directly by her killer. Despite efforts to clean the packet, several partial fingerprints were lifted from the envelope and sent to the FBI for testing. However, the prints were compromised in transit and thus could not be properly analyzed. The same day the packet was received by the Examiner, a handbag and a black suede shoe were reported to have been seen on top of a garbage can in an alley a short distance from Norton Avenue, 2 miles from the crime scene. The items were recovered by police, but they had also been wiped clean with gasoline, destroying any fingerprints. On January 26th, another letter was received by the Examiner, this time handwritten, which read, "Here it is. Turning in Wednesday, January 29th, 10 a.m. Had my fun at police. Black Dahlia Avenger." The letter also named a location at which the supposed killer would turn himself in. Police waited at the location on the morning of January 29th, but the alleged killer did not appear. Instead, at 1 p.m., the Examiner offices received another cut and pasted letter which read, "Have changed my mind. You would not give me a square deal. Dahlia killing was justified." The graphic nature of the crime and the subsequent letters received by the Examiner had resulted in a media circus surrounding Short's murder. Both local and national publications covered the story heavily, many of which reprinted sensationalistic reports suggesting that Short had been tortured for hours prior to her death. The information, however, was false, yet police allowed the reports to circulate so as to conceal Short's true cause of death, cerebral hemorrhage, from the public. Further reports about her personal life were publicized, including details about her alleged declining of Hansen's sexual advances. Additionally, a stripper who was an acquaintance of Short's told police that she liked to get guys worked up over her, but she'd leave them hanging dry. This led some reporters and detectives to look into the possibility that Short was a lesbian and begin questioning employees and patrons of gay bars in Los Angeles. This claim, however, remained unsubstantiated. The Herald Express also received several letters from the purported killer, again made with cut and pasted clippings, one of which read, "I will give up on Dahlia killing if I get 10 years. Don't try to find me." On February 1st, the Los Angeles Daily News reported that the case had run into a stone wall, with no new leads for investigators to pursue. The Examiner continued to run stories on the murder and the investigation, which was front-page news for 35 days following the discovery of the body. When interviewed, lead investigator Captain Jack Donahue told the press that he believed Short's murder had taken place in a remote building or shack on the outskirts of Los Angeles, and that her body transported into the city where it was disposed of. Based on the precise cuts and dissection of Short's body, the LAPD looked into the possibility that the murderer had been a surgeon, doctor, or someone with medical knowledge. In mid-February 1947, the LAPD served a warrant to the University of Southern California Medical School, which was located near the site where the body had been discovered, requesting a complete list of the program students. The university agreed so long as the students' identities remained private. Background checks were conducted but yielded no results. On March 14th, an apparent suicide note scrawled in pencil on a bit of paper was found tucked in a shoe in a pile of men's clothing by the ocean's edge at the foot of Breeze Avenue in Venice. The note read, "To whom it may concern, I have waited for the police to capture me for the Black Dahlia killing, but have not. I am too much of a coward to turn myself in, so this is the best way out for me. I couldn't help myself for that or this. Sorry, Mary." The pile of clothing was first seen by a beach caretaker, who reported the discovery to lifeguard Captain John Dillon. Dillon immediately notified Captain L. E. Christensen of West Los Angeles Police Station. The clothes included a coat and trousers of blue herringbone tweed, a brown and white t-shirt, white jockey shorts, tan socks, and tan moccasin leisure shoes, size about 8. The clothes gave no clue about the identity of their owner. Police quickly deemed Mark Hansen, the owner of the address book found in the packet, a suspect. Hansen was a wealthy local nightclub and theater owner and an acquaintance at whose home Short had stayed with friends. According to some sources, Hansen also confirmed that the purse and shoe discovered in the alley were in fact Short's, and Toth, Short's friend and roommate, told investigators that Short had recently rejected sexual advances from Hansen and suggested it as potential motive for him to kill her. However, he was cleared of suspicion in the case. In addition to Hansen, the LAPD interviewed over 150 men in the ensuing weeks whom they believed to be potential suspects. Manley, who had been one of the last people to see Short alive, was also investigated, but was cleared of suspicion after passing numerous polygraph examinations. Police also interviewed several persons found listed in Hansen's address book, including Martin Lewis, who had been an acquaintance of Short's. Lewis was able to provide an alibi for the date of Short's murder, as he was in Portland, Oregon visiting his dying father-in-law. A total of 750 investigators from the LAPD and other departments worked on the case during its initial stages, including 400 sheriff's deputies and 250 California State Patrol officers. Various locations were searched for potential evidence, including storm drains throughout Los Angeles, abandoned structures, and various sites along the Los Angeles River, but the searches yielded no further evidence. City Councilman Lloyd G. Davis posted a $10,000 reward for information leading police to Short's killer. After the announcement of the reward, various persons came forward with confessions, most of which police dismissed as false. Several of the false confessors were charged with obstruction of justice. By the spring of 1947, Short's murder had become a cold case with few new leads. Sergeant Finus Brown, one of the lead detectives on the case, blamed the press for compromising the investigation through journalists' probing of details and unverified reporting. In September 1949, a grand jury convened to discuss inadequacies in the LAPD's homicide unit based on their failure to solve numerous murders, especially those of women and children, in the previous several years, Short's being one of them. In the aftermath of the grand jury, further investigation was done on Short's past, with detectives tracing her movements between Massachusetts, California, and Florida, and also interviewed people who knew her in Texas and New Orleans. However, the interviews yielded no useful information in the murder. The case has never been definitively solved, and numerous theories have emerged about who might be responsible for Elizabeth Short's murder. Despite many suspects over the years, the identity of the killer remains a mystery, contributing to the intrigue surrounding this tragic and horrifying event. The Black Dahlia continues to be a captivating subject for true crime stories and has inspired countless books, films, and documentaries. The Beaumont children. On January 26, 1966, 3 children, Jane Beaumont, 9, Arnold Beaumont, 7, and Gracie Beaumont, 4, went missing while on a day trip to Glenelg Beach, a popular spot near Adelaide. They were last seen around 11:15 a.m., playing on the beach and planned to return to their home by noon, but they never made it back. The mysterious circumstances. The children had made the short trip to the beach alone, with their parents giving permission under the assumption they would be safe in the busy public area. Several witnesses reported seeing the children playing on the beach, but after that, they vanished without a trace. A man was reported to have been seen speaking to them shortly before they disappeared, and a witness later claimed to have seen the 3 children getting into a car with a man. Despite extensive searches by the police, the children's bodies were never found, and there was no significant evidence to suggest what happened to them. Possible theories. Abduction. The most widely accepted theory is that the children were abducted by someone, possibly the man seen talking to them. Some speculate that the children were taken to be sold or held for ransom, but no such leads ever surfaced. Serial killer. Another theory suggests the involvement of a serial killer who may have been operating in the area at the time, though no concrete evidence has linked the Beaumont case to other crimes. Accidental death. Some have speculated that the children might have drowned or been swept out to sea, though no bodies were recovered, and this theory doesn't explain the suspicious circumstances or the witness reports. Despite numerous investigations, theories, and public appeals for information over the years, the fate of the Beaumont children remains unknown. The case continues to haunt the Australian public, and the mystery of their disappearance remains unsolved to this day. The Zodiac Killer is one of the most infamous and mysterious serial killers in American history, and his identity remains unsolved to this day. Operating in the San Francisco Bay Area during the late 1960s and early 1970s, the Zodiac Killer was known for his chillingly cryptic messages, taunting letters, and eerie phone calls, all of which contributed to his notoriety. The case remains one of the most high-profile, unsolved serial killer investigations in the world. The Zodiac Killer is believed to have committed at least 5 murders between 1968 and 1969. The victims were usually couples in secluded areas, often attacked in cars or during late-night hours. The first known victims were Betty Lou Jensen, 16, and David Faraday, 17, who were shot and killed on December 20, 1968, near Vasco Road, outside of Livermore, California. The Zodiac's second confirmed attack occurred on July 4, 1969, when Darlene Ferrin, 22, and Michael Mageau, 19, were shot while parked in a remote area of Blue Rock Springs Park in Benicia, California. Ferrin was killed, but Mageau survived despite being shot several times. The third attack occurred later in 1969, on September 27th, when the Zodiac killed Brian Hartnell, 20, and Cecilia and Shepard, 22, near Lake Berryessa in Napa County. The killer approached the couple while they were sitting by the lake, wearing an executioner-style hood with a white mask and a symbol, crosshairs, on the front. He tied them up and then stabbed them both repeatedly. Hartnell survived the attack and was able to describe the killer to police. The Zodiac's final confirmed victim was Paul Stein, 29, a taxi driver who was shot and killed on October 11, 1969, in Presidio Heights, San Francisco. The Zodiac taunted police by sending a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, boasting about the murder and providing specific details that had not been released to the public. One of the most distinctive features of the Zodiac Killer's reign of terror was his propensity for sending cryptic letters to the press and police. These letters, often laced with taunts, demanded public attention and gave the killer a sense of control over the investigation. Some of the most chilling and infamous elements of these communications include the ciphered letters. The Zodiac sent multiple ciphers along with his letters, some of which contained strange symbols and codes that he claimed would reveal his identity. These cryptograms became a signature part of his mystique. The most famous of these ciphers is the 340-character cipher, sent to the San Francisco Chronicle in 1969. despite years of effort by cryptographers and amateur sleuths. This cipher remained unsolved for decades, until it was cracked in 2020 by a team of private citizens and codebreakers. The I like killing people letter. In one of his letters, the Zodiac openly boasted about his killings, expressing delight in murdering people and comparing it to a game. In this letter, he even suggested that the police were incapable of catching him. The Pines letter, another particularly unsettling letter, written in 1969, came after the Zodiac's killing spree at Lake Berryessa. In this letter, he gave explicit details about the attack, even describing how he had used the victim's car to drive away afterward. He also included the infamous symbol of a cross inside a circle, which became associated with his identity. While the Zodiac killer is confirmed to have killed at least 5 people, he claimed to have murdered many more. Some of these additional victims have never been verified, and whether they were truly the work of the Zodiac is still in dispute. The confirmed victims are Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, 1968, Darlene Farron and Michael Mageau, 1969, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia and Shepard, 1969.
Paul Stine, 1969.
The investigations, despite intense public interest, extensive investigations, and numerous suspects over the years, the Zodiac killer was never caught. Several aspects of the case make it especially challenging. The killer's elusiveness. The Zodiac seemed to enjoy the attention he was receiving, sending letters and phone calls to the police, often boasting about how he evaded capture. He seemed to thrive on creating confusion and chaos, often giving contradictory statements or false leads. The police were never able to pinpoint a specific suspect. Unreliable witness accounts. The Zodiac wore a hood during his attacks, which prevented witnesses from identifying him clearly. The surviving victims, like Michael Mageau, who was shot but survived, described the killer, but they did not provide a definitive match for any known individuals. The lack of physical evidence. The Zodiac's murders, particularly in secluded areas, often left little physical evidence behind. Although some of his letters included fingerprints, they were never a match for anyone in the police database. No weapon was ever definitively linked to him, and his face remained a mystery. Over the years, numerous suspects have been proposed, but none have been conclusively linked to the crimes. Some of the most well-known suspects include Arthur Lee Allen. Perhaps the most famous suspect, Allen was a convicted child molester who had been known to make bizarre comments about the Zodiac. Some people who knew him believed he fit the profile of the killer, but there was no direct evidence linking him to the crimes, and he denied being the Zodiac. He died in 1992, and DNA tests on his personal items did not match evidence found at the crime scenes. Richard Gaikowski, a journalist who worked for a newspaper in the Bay Area, Gaikowski has been named as a suspect by some due to his possible resemblance to the composite sketch of the Zodiac, as well as his background in law enforcement and media. However, there is no definitive evidence connecting him to the murders. Gary Francis Post. In 2021, a group of cold case investigators claimed to have identified Gary Francis Post as the Zodiac killer. They pointed to certain photos of Post, claiming his features matched the descriptions of the Zodiac. However, there was no conclusive evidence to support this theory, and Post's involvement has not been confirmed. The Zodiac's legacy. The Zodiac killer's case remains an enduring enigma in criminal history, and the mystery surrounding his identity continues to fascinate the public. The letters, cryptograms, and eerie phone calls made him a symbol of terror, and the fact that he was never caught has turned the case into a legendary unsolved crime. The Zodiac is often mentioned in discussions of notorious serial killers alongside figures like Ted Bundy and the Son of Sam. In 2021, the Casebreakers, a group of investigators, claimed to have identified the Zodiac killer as Gary Francis Post, a convicted murderer who had died in 2018. However, no DNA evidence has linked him to the killings, and law enforcement has not officially confirmed this theory. The case remains open, and the Zodiac killer's true identity remains a mystery. The Zodiac killer continues to captivate true crime enthusiasts, documentaries, books, and even films. His ability to taunt the authorities with cryptic messages and elude capture has cemented him as one of the most infamous figures in unsolved criminal history. D.B. Cooper. In 1971, a man named D.B. Cooper became one of the most infamous figures in American criminal history, but not for any reason you might expect. The mystery of D.B. Cooper is one of the greatest unsolved cases of modern times, and the tale surrounding his daring heist feels like it was ripped from a spy novel. On November 24, 1971, Cooper boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a routine flight traveling from Portland, Oregon, to Seattle, Washington. Everything seemed normal at first, until Cooper handed a note to a flight attendant, stating that he had a bomb in his briefcase and was hijacking the plane. The note was taken seriously, and soon Cooper was in control of the situation. He showed the flight attendant a bomb, which he kept in his briefcase, and made several demands: $200,000 in cash, for parachutes, and a fuel tanker truck standing by to refuel the plane once they landed in Mexico. The plane, carrying 36 passengers and crew, was diverted to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, where the authorities complied with Cooper's demands, handing over the ransom money and the parachutes. After receiving his demands, Cooper released the 36 passengers, keeping only the crew of 5 aboard. What happened next seems like something from a heist film. Cooper ordered the pilots to take off again, heading toward Mexico, but instructed them to fly at a low altitude and slow speed, which would allow him to parachute out of the plane. As the plane flew over the dense forests of Washington state, somewhere between 8 o'clock and 10 p.m., Cooper made his escape. He strapped on one of the parachutes, opened the rear stairway hatch of the Boeing 727, and jumped into the night, vanishing into the wilderness. Despite an extensive manhunt, D.B. Cooper was never found. No traces of him, the parachute, or the money were ever recovered. The FBI launched one of the largest manhunts in American history, but despite hundreds of leads and numerous theories, Cooper's identity and fate remain a mystery to this day. What makes this case so bizarre is how perfectly executed it was. Cooper seemed to be highly knowledgeable about aviation, parachuting, and the intricacies of airline operations. His demands were carefully planned, and the entire heist appeared to be carried out with the calm precision of a professional. He didn't just hijack the plane, he executed the perfect getaway. Years later, a decaying package of money, one of the ransom bills, was found in 1980 along the Columbia River, far from where the plane had been hijacked, fueling speculation that Cooper had survived and had been living under a false identity. The rest of the money was never recovered. Who was D.B. Cooper? How did he vanish without a trace? Was he an experienced criminal, a war veteran, or just an ordinary man with a wild plan? The FBI closed the case in 2016, but theories about Cooper's identity and his fate abound. Some believe he died in the wilderness during his jump. Others think he escaped to Mexico or Brazil, living out the rest of his life as a free man. This story, full of intrigue, skill, and mystery, remains one of the strangest true crime cases in history. The fact that it's still unsolved, decades after the event, makes it feel like fiction, and yet it is an absolutely true story. The case of D.B. Cooper remains a strange, thrilling tale of a man who vanished into thin air after pulling off one of the most audacious crimes in modern history. Disappearance of the Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers. The Flannan Isles are a small group of islands, and on December 15, 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur, vanished without a trace from the Eilean Moor Lighthouse. The setup, the lighthouse, located on the uninhabited island of Eilean Moor, was staffed by 3 men who worked in rotating shifts to maintain the light and signal to passing ships. On December 15th, a relief boat was sent to the island to rotate the keepers, as was customary every few weeks. The discovery of the disappearance. When the relief boat arrived, the lighthouse was found dark. The men were nowhere to be found. The lighthouse was in disarray. The dinner table was set with food, but the chairs were overturned. The lamps were still burning, and some personal items were left behind. However, the men were gone, and the door to the lighthouse was locked from the inside. The investigation. A search of the island and surrounding area found no bodies or signs of struggle. the lighthouse keepers seemed to have disappeared without a trace. The only clue that seemed to hint at what happened was a storm reported to have passed through the area shortly before the disappearance, though the men had been instructed to stay inside during storms. The mysterious theories. Several theories have been proposed over the years to explain the disappearance, but none have been proven. Storm or accident. One theory is that the men were swept away by a freak wave or died in a storm while out on the rocks. However, no bodies were ever found, and the lighthouse was left in a way that didn't seem consistent with a hurried exit or an accident. Murder or foul play. Another possibility is that one of the men killed the others and then left the island. However, there is little evidence to support this. No signs of violence were found, and the idea that a solitary man could overpower two others in such a confined space seems unlikely. Supernatural or paranormal explanations. Over the years, many have speculated that the men were taken by some supernatural force. Some have linked the disappearances to local legends of ghostly creatures or strange phenomena in the area. The eerie and remote nature of the lighthouse has made it a popular subject for ghost stories and paranormal investigations. Psychological breakdown. Some suggest that one or more of the keepers experienced a psychological breakdown, possibly due to isolation, and that they fled the lighthouse in a disoriented state. However, again, there is no evidence to support this theory, and it doesn't explain the state of the lighthouse when the boat arrived. Despite numerous investigations, the mystery of the missing lighthouse keepers remains unsolved. There were later reports of strange lights and sounds coming from the island, but these were never linked directly to the disappearance. The case has gone down in history as one of the most perplexing and eerie disappearances, and it still inspires curiosity and speculation to this day. The Flannan Isles lighthouse remains an iconic, eerie landmark, and the fate of Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur is a mystery that continues to baffle people over a century later. The Tamam Shud Case, also known as the Somerton Man Case. On December 1, 1948, the body of an unidentified man was discovered on Somerton Beach, near Adelaide, South Australia. The man appeared to have died of natural causes, but the circumstances surrounding his death were bizarre and mysterious, leading to one of Australia's most famous unsolved cases, the discovery. The body was found lying on the beach near a sea wall, in a position that seemed somewhat deliberate, as if the man had lain down peacefully. There were no obvious signs of trauma or wounds, and it appeared that he had died recently. No identification was found on the body, and there was no sign of a struggle. The strange details. The man was well dressed in a suit and tie, but there were no labels on his clothes, which was highly unusual for that time. A scrap of paper with the words Tamam Shud was found in a hidden pocket of his pants. This phrase is Persian, meaning ended or finished, and is a reference to a line from a book of poetry called the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. A copy of this book was found in the glove compartment of a car parked nearby. The book had been carefully torn, and on the back page, a cryptic code was written, which no one was able to decipher. The investigation. Despite extensive investigations, the identity of the man remained a mystery. The police never found any fingerprints, and the code written in the book was never cracked. The cause of death also couldn't be determined conclusively. Some experts suggested that the man may have been poisoned, but the exact nature of the poison was never found. Theories and speculations. Espionage or spy activity. The most widely discussed theory is that the case may have involved espionage. Some have speculated that the man was a spy, possibly linked to Cold War-era intelligence agencies. The cryptic message in the book and the secrecy surrounding his identity have fueled this theory. The time period post-World War II, during the early years of the Cold War, adds weight to the idea of espionage, but there is no direct evidence to support it. Murder or suicide. Another theory is that the man was murdered, possibly due to a love affair gone wrong or some other personal conflict. Some believe that he may have taken his own life, possibly using poison, but again, no clear evidence supports this theory. Connection to a woman. The man's mysterious connection to a woman in the Adelaide area has also been suggested. A local woman, Jessica Thompson, was identified as possibly having a connection to the case after a drawing of the man was shown to her, and she seemed to recognize him. However, she was never fully investigated, and no conclusive link was made between her and the victim. The cryptic code. The mysterious code found in the book remains one of the most intriguing aspects of the case. Despite attempts by codebreakers, the meaning of the code remains unknown. Some believe it could be a clue to the man's identity or a message that points to his death being part of a larger conspiracy or cover-up. For decades, the case remained a complete mystery. In 2009, advances in forensic science allowed for new DNA testing of the man's remains. But even this didn't yield a clear identity. In 2019, Australian authorities confirmed that the man's body had been exhumed for further examination. But as of today, the identity of the Somerton man, the meaning of the Tamam Shud message, and the cause of his death remain unsolved. The Tamam Shud case continues to captivate amateur sleuths, researchers, and the public alike, as it involves an eerie combination of cryptic messages, espionage speculation, and the disappearance of a man whose identity may never be fully understood. JonBenét Ramsey. The discovery. JonBenét's mother, Patsy Ramsey, reported her daughter missing early in the morning of December 26th, claiming to have found a ransom note demanding $118,000 for JonBenét's return. The note was unusually long and detailed, instructing the Ramsey family not to contact the police. However, later that same day, JonBenét's father, John Ramsey, found her body in the basement of their home. The murder. JonBenét's body showed signs of both sexual assault and blunt force trauma. She had been strangled with a garrote made from a piece of her own clothing, and there were signs of asphyxiation. It appeared she had been dead for several hours before her body was found. The ransom note was left behind, but it was later determined to be suspiciously detailed and was written in the same pen and on the same type of paper found inside the Ramsey home. The investigation. The investigation into JonBenét's death was extremely controversial and filled with missteps. The Boulder Police Department came under heavy criticism for mishandling evidence early on. For example, the police allowed family members and friends to roam freely through the house during the initial investigation, potentially contaminating the crime scene. The ransom note. The note was deemed unusual for several reasons. First, the ransom amount, $118,000, was eerily close to the bonus John Ramsey had received that year. The wording of the note also seemed oddly formal and specific, leading some to believe it might have been written by someone familiar with the family. Key theories. Over the years, several theories have emerged about who might have killed JonBenét, but none have been conclusively proven. Some of the major theories include the family. The Ramseys themselves became the prime suspects early on, especially since the murder occurred in their home. Suspicion fell on Patsy Ramsey because of her role in the discovery of the ransom note and the fact that her handwriting was similar to that of the note. Some theorized that she could have accidentally killed JonBenét in a fit of rage, perhaps due to a bathroom accident or an argument, and then staged the crime scene to make it look like an abduction. John Ramsey, JonBenét's father, was also investigated, but no evidence directly linked him to the crime. Some believed he may have had some involvement, either as an accomplice or because of a potential family dispute, though this theory lacked evidence. Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's older brother, was also a focal point. Some speculate that Burke, who was 9 at the time, may have accidentally harmed JonBenét, leading to her death, and the family covered it up to protect him. However, there has never been any solid proof to support this theory. The intruder. Another popular theory is that an intruder broke into the Ramsey home and killed JonBenét. Over the years, various suspects have been suggested, but no conclusive evidence has ever been found linking anyone to the crime. In 2003, a man named John Mark Carr was arrested after confessing to the murder, but his confession was quickly deemed false. DNA evidence later ruled him out as the perpetrator. The idea that an intruder could have entered the home and left without leaving clear traces of their presence has made this theory particularly difficult to prove. There were no signs of forced entry, and no physical evidence was found to conclusively identify the killer. Sexual motive. The fact that JonBenét had been sexually assaulted led some to believe that the motive was sexual in nature. However, there is no clear explanation as to whether the sexual assault was the primary motive, or if it was part of a staging to mislead investigators. In 2008, DNA evidence from JonBenét's clothing was re-examined, and it was found that an unknown male's DNA was present. This was seen by some as evidence of an intruder, but there has been little progress in identifying the person linked to the DNA. Some speculated that the DNA could have come from a family member or from contamination, but no one was ever able to confirm the true source. The aftermath. Despite numerous theories, extensive media coverage, and multiple investigations, JonBenét's killer has never been identified. The Ramsey family has continued to maintain their innocence, and in 2008, after years of legal battles, the Boulder District Attorney's Office officially cleared them of any wrongdoing, citing the lack of sufficient evidence to charge anyone in the case. The murder of JonBenét Ramsey remains one of the most tragic and frustrating unsolved mysteries in American criminal history. It continues to spark debates and investigations, with many still searching for answers in the case. Despite advancements in DNA analysis and forensic science, the truth behind JonBenét's death remains elusive. Disappearance of the Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, headed for Beijing, China. The Boeing 777-200ER, with 239 people on board, was flying over the South China Sea when it lost communication with air traffic control at around 1:20 a.m., about 40 minutes after takeoff. The plane disappeared from radar screens, and the last known contact was a routine message from the plane's pilot. The aircraft's final known location was over the South China Sea, but after losing radar contact, the plane's automatic tracking system continued to send handshakes to a satellite for several more hours. These handshakes suggested that the plane veered off its planned flight path and flew far off course, heading south over the Indian Ocean. After the plane's disappearance, one of the largest and most expensive search operations in aviation history was launched. Despite scanning thousands of square miles of the Indian Ocean, no wreckage was found for several months. Some debris from the plane, including a wing flaperon, was discovered on beaches in the Indian Ocean, but the bulk of the aircraft has never been located. Since the plane's disappearance, many theories and speculations have arisen about what happened to Flight MH370. Some of the most prominent theories include hijacking or terrorist attack. Early on, many speculated that the plane might have been hijacked or brought down deliberately. Some theories suggested terrorism, either from a passenger or an external force, could have been involved. However, no group has ever claimed responsibility, and no evidence has conclusively linked the plane's disappearance to a terrorist attack. Pilot involvement. Another theory centered around the pilot and co-pilot, particularly Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, who was in control of the flight. Some have speculated that the pilot intentionally diverted the plane and deliberately crashed it into the ocean. This theory is based on the plane's sudden change in course and the fact that Captain Zahari's flight simulator contained a route that roughly mirrored the plane's final path. However, no definitive evidence has ever linked the pilot to the incident, and some experts have rejected this theory. Mechanical failure or catastrophic event. Some believe that the disappearance could have been caused by a sudden catastrophic event, such as a fire or a loss of cabin pressure, which incapacitated the crew and passengers. The plane might have flown on autopilot for hours until it eventually ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean. However, this theory has been questioned, as no distress signals or signs of trouble were reported by the crew before the plane lost contact. Conspiracy and cover-up. Some suggest that there could have been a cover-up by governments or agencies involved in the investigation. These conspiracy theories claim that key pieces of evidence might have been withheld, and the real reasons behind the disappearance are being hidden for political or other reasons. Flight path and final location. Despite the satellite handshakes, the precise flight path and final location of MH370 remain a mystery. The search for the plane has focused on a remote stretch of the Indian Ocean, known as the Seventh Arcade, where the plane is believed to have gone down. However, the location is vast, and the underwater search efforts have been hampered by the depth and difficulty of the ocean floor. Ongoing investigations. The investigation into MH370's disappearance has officially been closed by the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, ATSB, as of 2018, after an exhaustive search operation failed to find the wreckage of the plane. However, private efforts to search for the aircraft continue, and families of the missing passengers still demand answers. In 2023, a new search team, led by American company Ocean Infinity, announced plans to continue looking for the aircraft in areas that had not been fully explored. The aftermath. The disappearance of Flight MH370 remains one of the most tragic and haunting mysteries of modern aviation. It has raised critical questions about aviation safety, the reliability of tracking systems, and how well airlines and governments are prepared to handle such crises. The families of those on board still seek closure, while the world remains captivated by the unanswered questions surrounding the disappearance. Despite some pieces of wreckage being found, the exact cause of the disappearance and the whereabouts of the aircraft are still unknown. The case remains open, with no definitive answers about what happened to Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. The Isdal woman. This case is one of the most mysterious and eerie unsolved cases in modern history. It involves the discovery of an unidentified woman's body in Isdal Valley, near Bergen, Norway, in 1970. Despite extensive investigations, the woman's identity and the circumstances of her death remain a mystery, leading to a host of theories and suspicions, including espionage, murder, and cover-ups. On November 29, 1970, two hikers discovered the charred remains of a woman's body in Isdal Valley, located in the mountains near Bergen, Norway. The body had been severely burned, and there were no obvious signs of a struggle or violence, but it appeared that the woman had been intentionally set on fire. Nearby, police found a number of strange and puzzling clues, which only deepened the mystery. Key findings. The woman's identity. The woman was approximately 30 to 40 years old, and she had no identification on her. Her face was burned beyond recognition, and dental records were inconclusive. There were no fingerprints available to help identify her. Clothing and personal items. The woman was dressed in high-quality clothing, but all labels had been carefully cut out. This detail raised suspicions that she might have been involved in something covert, as removing labels is sometimes associated with espionage or secretive activities. She also had a number of personal items with her, including a handbag containing a variety of small, seemingly unrelated items, though nothing directly linked her to a specific person or place. A mysterious note. A piece of paper with a coded message was found near the body. The code was never deciphered, and it remains one of the case's most enduring mysteries. The fire. The body was found near a campfire, and it appeared the woman had either set herself on fire or been burned after her death. A bottle of sleeping pills and a plastic bag were found nearby, leading investigators to suspect that she had either ingested the pills or that they had been used to drug her before her death. Theories and speculations. Espionage or secret agent theory. One of the most enduring theories is that the Isdal woman was involved in espionage or covert operations. The fact that her clothing labels were removed, the coded message, and the fact that she was traveling under multiple aliases have all contributed to this theory. Some speculate she might have been a foreign spy operating in Norway during the Cold War, possibly working for a Western or Eastern intelligence agency. However, no one has ever found concrete evidence to support this theory. Murder by a third party. Another theory is that the woman was murdered by someone she knew or met, possibly someone involved in criminal activities or espionage. The possibility of a botched assassination or some form of psychological manipulation has also been suggested. Self-unaliving. Though less likely, some have considered the possibility that the woman may have taken her own life. The presence of sleeping pills and the apparent self-inflicted nature of the fire suggest that she might have chosen to end her life. However, the fact that she had been so meticulously careful about erasing her identity and leaving behind cryptic clues makes suicide less plausible in many people's eyes. Connections to multiple cities. Investigators discovered that the woman had been traveling under several different names, having checked into hotels in Bergen, Oslo, and Stavanger in the weeks leading up to her death. In some cases, she had used different aliases, which suggests she may have been deliberately concealing her true identity or trying to evade detection. One witness even reported seeing her with a man shortly before her death, but the identity of this person was never verified. A conspiracy or cover-up? Given the strange circumstances of the case and the difficulty of identifying the woman or uncovering a clear motive, some have speculated that there might have been a cover-up at play, either by local authorities or other parties involved in secretive operations. This theory is bolstered by the fact that the investigation was drawn out and some documents related to the case were sealed for years. Investigations and current status. Despite years of investigation by Norwegian authorities, no one has ever been able to definitively identify the Isdal woman or determine how she died. Her case remained largely unsolved for decades, and in 2016, the Norwegian police reopened the investigation, citing advances in forensic science and a renewed interest in the case. DNA testing and analysis of old evidence have not led to any breakthroughs that could identify her. Legacy and continuing mystery. The mystery of the Isdal woman has continued to fascinate both amateur sleuths and professional investigators. It has inspired numerous books, documentaries, and theories about espionage, criminal activity, and unsolved mysteries. The case remains one of the most perplexing cold cases in Scandinavian history, with no clear answers about the woman's identity, her background, or how she met her untimely death. The Isdal woman's death, the eerie circumstances surrounding it, and the untraceable clues left behind make this case one of the most haunting and mysterious in modern crime history, and it continues to puzzle investigators to this day. Another intriguing and chilling unsolved mystery is the case of the Villisca Axe Murders, a brutal and mysterious mass murder that occurred in 1912 in Villisca, Iowa. The case, on the night of June 9th to 10th, 1912, in the small town of Villisca, Iowa, 8 people were brutally murdered in their sleep with an axe. The victims included Josiah Moore, age 43, his wife Sarah, age 39, and their 4 children, as well as 2 young guests who were staying with the family that night, Lena and Ina Stillinger, ages 12 and 8. The entire family was found in their beds, their heads shattered by blows from an axe. The crime was discovered the following morning when neighbors became concerned after the Moore family didn't appear for church. When a neighbor went to the house to investigate, she found the door locked. After gaining entry, she discovered the gruesome scene. The entire family had been killed. The bodies of the victims were covered with sheets, and the axe used in the killings was found in the same room, along with an overturned kerosene lamp that was still burning. The police were called to the scene, and it quickly became clear that this was not a random robbery gone wrong, as nothing of value was stolen. The fact that the victims had been murdered in their sleep with such brutality made it all the more chilling. What was particularly eerie was that the murderer seemed to have taken his time, carefully covering the bodies with sheets and even eating food from the kitchen before leaving. The investigation. Several theories were proposed over the years, and multiple suspects were investigated, but no one was ever conclusively charged with the crime. Some of the key aspects of the case include the murderer's behavior. The fact that the killer stayed in the house for hours after committing the murders, eating food, cleaning up, and covering the bodies, suggests a level of calm and deliberate intent. This led to theories that the killer was someone familiar with the family or someone with a psychological profile that fit the behavior of a rational killer, rather than someone driven by impulse or passion. Suspects and theories. Frank Jones, a prominent local businessman and former employer of Josiah Moore. Frank Jones was suspected by some due to a possible motive rooted in a business rivalry and personal animosity. Josiah Moore had allegedly been having an affair with Jones's daughter-in-law, which could have led to a motive for revenge. However, there was no evidence linking him directly to the crime, and he was never formally charged. Reverend George Kelly. A traveling preacher named Reverend George Kelly was another suspect. He had been in the town at the time of the murders, and he had a history of strange and disturbing behavior. Kelly had confessed to the crime during a police interrogation, but his confession was inconsistent and later retracted. He was never charged with the murders, and there was no concrete evidence to prove his involvement. Other theories. Over the years, a number of theories have been suggested. including the possibility of the killer being someone with a history of violent behavior, a drifter passing through town, or even a family member with a grudge. The nature of the crime, carrying out a massacre in the dead of night without leaving much of a trace, made it especially difficult for investigators to pinpoint the culprit. The lack of evidence. One of the most frustrating aspects of the investigation was the complete lack of physical evidence. There were no fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, and no witnesses. The crime scene was meticulously cleaned, suggesting that the killer knew what they were doing or was familiar with the house. The killer's ability to commit such a brutal act without leaving any significant clues led some to believe that the murderer had carefully planned the crime and may have had experience in committing violent acts. Theories and speculation. Family-related grudge. The idea that the killer might have had some personal connection to the Moore family is a central theory. Whether it was due to business rivalry, jealousy, or some other personal grievance, many have speculated that someone close to the family, possibly an ex-employee, acquaintance, or even a disgruntled relative, was responsible. Serial killer. Another theory is that the murders were the work of a serial killer, someone who had been operating in the area or who may have committed similar crimes in other towns. The careful planning and the brutality of the murders suggested that the killer could have had previous experience in carrying out violent acts. Supernatural or folk theories. Some locals and amateur sleuths have speculated that the crime was connected to paranormal activity or folklore. In the years following the murders, the house where the murders took place became a site of interest for those fascinated by the supernatural, and some have suggested that the house itself might be haunted by the victims, adding a layer of eerie mystery to the case. The aftermath. Despite the intense investigation, the Villisca Axe murders were never solved. Over the years, various individuals have claimed to know the identity of the killer or to have new evidence, but none of these claims have been substantiated. The case remains officially unsolved to this day. In the decades since the murders, the Villisca Axe Murder House has become a popular destination for true crime enthusiasts and ghost hunters, further cementing the case's status as one of the most disturbing and enduring unsolved mysteries in American history. The brutal nature of the murders, the lack of a clear suspect, and the eerie details surrounding the case have kept the Villisca Axe murders in the public eye for over a century, and the truth of what happened on that fateful night remains one of the most chilling unsolved crimes. Jack the Ripper is the name given to an unidentified individual believed to be responsible for a series of unsolved murders in London's East End in 1888. The case has become one of the most famous in criminal history, primarily due to the brutal nature of the crimes and the enduring mystery surrounding the killer's identity. The murders. Between August and November 1888, 5 women were tragically murdered in the Whitechapel district of London. These women were often described as vulnerable and working in the poorest parts of the city. The victims were Mary and Nichols, August 31, 1888.
Annie Chapman, September at.
Elizabeth Stride, September 30th, 1888. Catherine Eddowes, September 30th, 1888. Mary Jane Kelly, November 9th, 1888. The killer's actions were characterized by extreme violence, and the murders were marked by distinct patterns. These tragic events led to widespread fear and public attention, as the killings seemed to occur with no clear motive and left little evidence behind. The investigation. At the time, forensic science was not as advanced as it is today, and the investigation faced significant challenges. Witness testimony was often inconsistent or unreliable, and there were few clues to help the authorities identify the perpetrator. Additionally, the social conditions in the Whitechapel area, including poverty and overcrowding, meant that many residents were either unaware of or too frightened to come forward with helpful information. Public reaction. The murders were sensationalized by the press, and the case quickly became a subject of widespread media coverage. Newspapers published regular updates and graphic details, which fueled public fascination and fear. The killer's apparent elusiveness and the brutal nature of the crimes kept the case in the public eye for months. Suspects. Over the years, numerous individuals have been suggested as possible suspects in the case. Some of the most commonly discussed include Montague John Druitt, a barrister who committed suicide shortly after the last murder; Aaron Kosminski, a resident of the area who had a history of mental illness. James Maybrick, a cotton merchant whose name was linked to the case by the appearance of a diary many years later. However, despite numerous theories and countless investigations, the true identity of Jack the Ripper has never been conclusively determined. Legacy: the Jack the Ripper case remains one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in history. Its lasting impact has inspired countless books, films, and documentaries, keeping the story alive in popular culture. The case also marked an important moment in criminal history, as it spurred the development of investigative methods, including the use of criminal profiling and forensic techniques. While the exact identity of the killer remains a mystery, the story of Jack the Ripper has shaped the way we think about crime, justice, and the limitations of investigative work. It is a reminder of the complexity of unsolved cases and the lasting impact they have on public consciousness. This version keeps the core details of the case intact while ensuring the content is sensitive and adheres to guidelines, focusing on the historical and investigative aspects of the mystery. If you would like to hear a deeper version of Jack the Ripper, I'll link a video from the Paranormal Files in the box below. The Death of Elisa Lam, 2013. The death of Elisa Lam is one of the most chilling and mysterious cases to have garnered widespread attention in recent years. Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old Canadian student, was found dead in the water tank on the roof of the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles on February 19, 2013. Her death and the events leading up to it remain an unsolved mystery. Elisa Lam was a student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver and was traveling alone through California. She checked into the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles on January 26, 2013, and was staying in a shared dorm-style room. During her stay, guests began to complain about low water pressure and an unusual taste and color of the water. Hotel staff investigated, and on February 19th, they discovered Elisa's body in one of the water tanks on the roof of the hotel. She had been missing for over 2 weeks. The mystery surrounding Elisa Lam's death deepened after a surveillance video of her last known moments was released. The video, recorded on January 31, 2013, shows Elisa entering an elevator in the Cecil Hotel. Her behavior in the video was erratic and unsettling. She presses multiple elevator buttons, steps in and out of the elevator, and gestures as if she is talking to someone outside the elevator. At one point, she seems to hide or crouch in the corner of the elevator, almost as though she is trying to avoid someone or something. The video quickly went viral, sparking widespread speculation and theories about what had happened to her. Some thought she might have been under the influence of drugs, experiencing a mental health crisis, or even being chased by an unseen assailant. The odd behavior in the elevator has been the subject of numerous interpretations and remains one of the most chilling pieces of evidence in the case. The water tank. After Elisa was found, investigators conducted an autopsy, which revealed that she had drowned in the tank. However, there were no signs of physical trauma or foul play. The tank was difficult to access, requiring a ladder and a lock to be opened, and Elisa's body was found naked, with her clothes and personal belongings in the tank with her. The discovery of her body in the tank raised many questions. The fact that Elisa's body was discovered in the water tank, where it was difficult to access, led to speculation about how she ended up there and whether it was possible she had entered the tank on her own or was somehow locked inside. Theories and speculation. Numerous theories have been proposed to explain Elisa Lam's strange behavior and death, but none have been proven. Accidental death. Some believe Elisa's death was an accident, possibly caused by a manic episode or a mental health crisis. It's possible she climbed into the water tank to seek refuge or explore, became trapped, and accidentally drowned. However, the fact that the tank was locked and difficult to access has raised questions about how she could have entered it alone. Foul play. Another theory is that Elisa's death was the result of foul play. Despite the absence of evidence of physical injury, some believe that someone could have had a role in her death, either by forcing her into the tank or somehow incapacitating her. However, no signs of external trauma were found, and no one was ever identified as a suspect. Paranormal theories. Given the Cecil Hotel's dark history, some have speculated that Elisa's death may have been linked to paranormal activity. The hotel has long been associated with strange occurrences and has had a history of violent events. Some believe Elisa's eerie behavior and tragic fate may be connected to the hotel's haunted reputation. Mental health issues. Elisa had previously written on her blog about struggles with depression and bipolar disorder, leading some to speculate that her death may have been a tragic outcome of a mental health crisis. Her behavior in the elevator could suggest she was experiencing a manic episode or severe confusion. The hotel's dark history. The Cecil Hotel, now renamed the Stay on Main, has a long and dark history, and some people believe it played a role in Elisa's death. Over the years, the hotel has been linked to several other tragic events, including suicides, murders, and even the infamous Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker serial killer, who stayed at the hotel during his killing spree in the 1980s. The hotel's association with these events has led to speculation that Elisa's death could be linked to the location's disturbing history, with some suggesting that the building itself may have had a psychological or paranormal influence on her. Investigation and official findings. The Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD, investigated Elisa Lam's death extensively, but the official conclusion was that her death was accidental and there was no foul play involved. However, the mystery of the elevator video, combined with the strange circumstances surrounding the case, continues to fuel speculation. To this day, the disappearance and death of Elisa Lam remains one of the most baffling unsolved mysteries of the 21st century, with many questions left unanswered. Whether it was a tragic accident, the result of a mental health crisis, or something far more sinister, the mystery surrounding Elisa Lam's death continues to captivate and haunt people around the world. Elisa's story has left an indelible mark on popular culture, and the eerie elevator footage continues to intrigue viewers. The true cause of her death may never be fully explained, and the Cecil Hotel's role in the mystery only adds to the intrigue. The Lizzie Borden Case. On the morning of August 4, 1892, in Fall River, Massachusetts, a gruesome double murder took place at the home of Andrew Borden and his wife, Abby Borden. The victims were found brutally murdered with an axe. The main suspect in the case was their daughter, Lizzie Borden, who was later acquitted of the murders but remains a controversial figure to this day. Early in the morning, Andrew Borden, a wealthy and prominent local businessman, and his wife Abby were each brutally attacked in their home. Andrew was found dead on the living room couch, his skull severely hacked with an axe, while Abby was discovered upstairs in a similar condition. Both victims had been struck multiple times, making the murders particularly shocking and violent. Lizzie Borden, the couple's 32-year-old daughter, was in the house at the time of the murders. Lizzie's behavior after the crime was peculiar. She reportedly failed to show much emotion and was acting strangely when neighbors arrived. She told authorities she had been in the barn at the time of the murders, but there were discrepancies in her statements. The investigation. Lizzie Borden became the primary suspect due to several unusual circumstances. She had a strained relationship with her stepmother, Abby, and there were rumors of financial motives. Andrew Borden had reportedly left much of his wealth to his wife and daughters. The Borden family's wealth and Lizzie's position as the unmarried daughter of a wealthy man added to the intrigue. Evidence was scarce, and much of the investigation was based on circumstantial evidence and Lizzie's behavior. No direct proof of her guilt was ever uncovered, but the timing of her behavior and the lack of anyone else in the house at the time made her the central figure of suspicion. Lizzie's story was inconsistent, and there were questions about her whereabouts during the murders. Some witnesses testified that she had been in the house during the killings, but there was no physical evidence directly linking her to the crime. The trial. Lizzie Borden was arrested and charged with the murders of her father and stepmother in August 1892. The case went to trial in June 1893, and it attracted significant media attention. Lizzie was portrayed as a possible parricide, and her behavior during the investigation and trial, including her inconsistent statements and lack of emotion, was scrutinized by the public. Despite the circumstantial evidence against her, Lizzie was acquitted of both murders on June 20, 1893. The jury deliberated for just over an hour before delivering the not guilty verdict, citing a lack of direct evidence that would conclusively prove her involvement. Theories and speculation. The motive behind the murders is still unclear. Some theorists suggest that Lizzie was angry at her father for his stinginess and his controlling nature. Others speculate that there was tension between Lizzie and Abby, possibly due to a strained stepmother-daughter relationship. Over the years, there have been many theories about who might have committed the murders. Some suggest that Lizzie had a mental breakdown or that someone else in the house, possibly her sister Emma Borden, could have been involved. However, none of these theories have been proven. Another theory is that Lizzie's maid, Bridget Sullivan, who was in the house at the time of the murders, might have been involved. Some believe that Lizzie might have had an accomplice or acted out of self-defense. The aftermath. Despite her acquittal, Lizzie Borden's reputation was permanently tarnished. She lived the remainder of her life in seclusion in Fall River, and she was often the subject of public fascination and media coverage. Lizzie Borden died in 1927 from pneumonia at the age of 66. To this day, the case remains one of the most famous unsolved murders in American history. Her story continues to be the subject of books, films, and even popular folklore. Legacy. The Lizzie Borden house is now a museum and bed and breakfast, and visitors can tour the site where the murders took place. The case has fascinated people for generations, and Lizzie Borden has become a figure of legend, with her name still associated with the gruesome crime. The famous rhyme, Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Continues to be a popular, though inaccurate piece of folklore, adding to the lasting intrigue of the case. The Lizzie Borden case remains unsolved in the sense that many questions about the murders, the motive, and the true identity of the killer are still debated. Was Lizzie really guilty, or was she the victim of a miscarriage of justice? The mystery surrounding the case persists, making it one of the most famous and enduring unsolved criminal cases in American history. The Dyatlov Pass Incident. The Dyatlov Pass Incident is one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. It involves the strange deaths of 9 experienced hikers in the Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia in 1959. Despite extensive investigation and speculation over the years, the cause of their deaths remains unexplained. On January 25, 1959, a group of 9 hikers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute set out on a skiing expedition in the northern Ural Mountains, led by Igor Dyatlov, an experienced mountaineer. The hikers were aiming to reach Otorten Mountain, a remote destination, and the trip was expected to take about 16 days. The group set up a camp on the night of February 1st, but something went terribly wrong during the night. The following day, after they missed their expected return date, authorities launched a search. On February 26th, after days of searching, the abandoned tent of the group was discovered at Dyatlov Pass. The tent was found cut open from the inside, and the hikers' belongings, including shoes and other personal items, were left behind. Oddly, the hikers seemed to have fled in a hurry, without their proper winter clothing, leaving only footprints in the snow. The bodies of the missing hikers were found at various locations around the campsite, some several hundred meters away. Many of them were found in a state of undress, with some barefoot or wearing only socks. Some of the hikers had sustained severe internal injuries, such as fractured ribs and skull fractures, but there were no external wounds to explain these injuries. One of the more unusual aspects of the case was that some hikers were found with missing eyes and tongues, which raised questions and led to a range of theories about what might have happened. Given the bizarre nature of the incident, many theories have emerged over the years. Avalanche. One of the most common theories is that the hikers fled their tent in response to an avalanche or the threat of one. However, no avalanche was found in the area, and the hikers' injuries did not match typical avalanche-related trauma. Military involvement. Another theory suggests that the group could have encountered a military test, possibly involving secret experiments or weapons. This was fueled by the fact that the Soviet Union was conducting military tests in the region during that time. Natural causes. Some have suggested that the hikers were victims of harsh weather conditions, or perhaps an animal attack, though no sign of wildlife tracks or other typical evidence was found near the bodies. Infrasound or panic. Infrasound, which is low-frequency sound that can affect the human body, was also considered a possible cause. Some believe that infrasound generated by high winds could have induced disorientation or panic, leading the hikers to flee the tent in a state of fear. Psychological factors. Some speculate that the intense pressure of the environment could have caused a psychological breakdown in the group, leading to erratic behavior. Investigation. The Soviet authorities conducted an investigation, but the findings were inconclusive. The official report mentioned that the hikers died as a result of a compelling force, but no further details were given. The case was closed, and the mystery surrounding their deaths remained unresolved. Recent developments. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the case, and new investigations focused on the possibility of an avalanche as the cause of death. However, even after new efforts, the exact cause of the incident remains a topic of debate among researchers and enthusiasts. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of the most puzzling unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. Despite various theories and investigations, the cause of the hikers' deaths has never been definitively explained. The case continues to capture the imagination of people around the world, and it remains an open question, awaiting a conclusive answer. The disappearance of Ryan Shtuka. Ryan Shtuka, a 20-year-old university student from Alberta, Canada, disappeared on February 17, 2018, while on a skiing trip with friends and family in Whistler, British Columbia. His case has perplexed investigators and continues to be a subject of public interest due to the strange circumstances surrounding his disappearance. Ryan had traveled to Whistler for a ski trip with a group of friends, where they stayed at a rental house. After a day of skiing, Ryan and his friends went to a house party in the Creekside area of Whistler, a popular mountain resort town. The last known sighting, Ryan was last seen leaving the party around 2 a.m. on February 17th. His friends and others at the party reportedly saw him leaving the house, and it was believed that he was walking back to the home where he was staying, which was located in the Alpine Meadows area of Whistler. This was about a 15-minute walk from the party. The search. When Ryan failed to return to the house, his friends and family became concerned and immediately started searching for him. His parents were notified, and the police launched an official search effort that included hundreds of searchers, dogs, and helicopters. Despite extensive efforts, Ryan was not found. Ryan's belongings. The search led authorities to an abandoned backpack near a snowbank in the Creekside area, but there were no signs of Ryan himself. This discovery added to the mystery, as the backpack seemed out of place but yielded no additional clues regarding his whereabouts. Theories and speculation. Injury or accident. One of the leading theories is that Ryan suffered some kind of accident, possibly related to alcohol or the late hour, that caused him to become disoriented. Some speculated that he might have fallen in the snow or wandered off the trail, though this theory was never fully proven. Foul play. While there was no evidence of foul play, the possibility that someone may have been involved in Ryan's disappearance has been raised. However, no leads emerged that suggested that anyone was responsible for his disappearance. Authorities found no evidence of a struggle or altercation. Lost in the wilderness. The rugged terrain and large, remote areas in Whistler raised the possibility that Ryan might have gotten lost or trapped in the snow-covered woods. Whistler is known for its vast, mountainous environment, which could have made it difficult for Ryan to find his way back, particularly in the dark. Drug or substance use. Some have speculated that Ryan may have been impaired by alcohol or drugs at the time of his disappearance. Given that it was a party atmosphere, it is possible he was under the influence, which might have led to him becoming disoriented and getting lost. However, no official confirmation of this theory has been made. The search efforts were intense, involving hundreds of volunteers, search dogs, helicopters, and divers. However, despite the massive search, Ryan was never found, and there was no significant evidence discovered that could explain his disappearance. Ryan's family has continued to search for him, even funding their own efforts. His family members have said that they believe he might still be alive and that the case was mishandled in some ways, particularly regarding the lack of immediate follow-up on key clues. Social media and public attention. The case garnered widespread media attention, and several online campaigns were launched in an effort to find Ryan. His disappearance sparked conversations about the dangers of solo skiing and hiking in remote areas, as well as the risks associated with traveling in unfamiliar environments. Theories about the disappearance. Possible mental health struggles. Some have wondered if Ryan might have been dealing with personal or mental health issues, which led to his disappearance. However, his family has indicated that there was no indication of depression or distress in the days leading up to his trip. Weather and terrain factors. The weather conditions in Whistler during the winter months can be treacherous. Heavy snow, freezing temperatures, and poor visibility could have contributed to Ryan's disappearance if he had become lost or disoriented. Wildlife and the elements. Some theories have suggested that Ryan may have encountered wildlife or extreme weather conditions that led to his death, though no physical evidence supports this theory. As of now, Ryan Shtuka's disappearance remains unsolved. Despite years of searching, no new leads or significant information have surfaced. His case is considered a cold case, and the family continues to hold out hope for new developments or answers. The family has expressed frustration over the lack of answers and has stated that they believe Ryan did not simply wander off or die from natural causes. They continue to advocate for more focus on the case and have asked for any new leads to be taken seriously. The disappearance of Ryan Shtuka is a deeply tragic and perplexing case. The young man went missing in a well-populated ski resort town under mysterious circumstances, and despite an exhaustive search and several years of investigation, the answers remain elusive. His case remains an open and active mystery, and his family continues to search for answers about what happened to their son.
Unsolved Case.
Fawziyah Javed's disappearance and murder, 2021. Fawziyah Javed was a 31-year-old woman from Leeds, West Yorkshire, who disappeared on September 20, 2021 under suspicious circumstances. Her disappearance quickly turned into a tragic case of murder, with her death being linked to an abusive relationship. Fawziyah Javed was last seen on September 20, 2021, when she was leaving her home in Leeds to take her children to school. She was supposed to be attending a family gathering later that day, but she never showed up. The last known sighting of Fawziyah was at a beauty salon where she had an appointment earlier in the morning. The search, as hours passed and Fawziyah didn't respond to messages or return home, her family became increasingly concerned. Searches were launched by the police, and her case soon attracted significant media attention. Social media campaigns were started by her family and friends to spread awareness of her disappearance. Discovery of the body. Fawziyah's body was found on September 26, 2021, in a wooded area near the village of Scarcroft, around 10 miles away from her home in Leeds. The location where she was found was not far from where she was last seen. It was later confirmed by authorities that she had died as a result of blunt force trauma. The arrest of Kashif Anwar. Fawziyah's partner, Kashif Anwar, was identified as a suspect in the case. Anwar, who had a history of abusive behavior, was arrested and charged with murder after her body was discovered. Kashif Anwar, a 29-year-old man, had been in a long-term abusive relationship with Fawziyah, and her family had previously expressed concerns about his controlling and violent nature. The abusive relationship. Fawziyah had reportedly been in an abusive relationship with Kashif Anwar for several years. She had spoken openly to friends and family about the difficulties she had faced in the relationship, and there were signs of domestic abuse in the months leading up to her death. It was later revealed that Fawziyah had made plans to leave Anwar and take their children with her, which might have been a factor in the escalating violence. Kashif Anwar's actions after the murder. After Fawziyah went missing, Anwar initially denied any involvement in her disappearance. He reportedly gave a false alibi and tried to cover his tracks, but his behavior raised suspicion. He was eventually arrested on October 4, 2021, and charged with her murder. The investigation into Fawziyah's disappearance and murder was extensive. Police uncovered evidence of abuse and control within her relationship with Kashif Anwar, including prior reports of violence and threats. It was revealed that Fawziyah had been planning to leave Anwar for some time, which is often cited as a key reason behind his violent actions. In addition to her family's testimony, investigators uncovered witness statements and CCTV footage showing Fawziyah's movements in the hours before her death. Kashif Anwar was tried for the murder of Fawziyah Javed in 2022. During the trial, it was revealed that Anwar had killed Fawziyah in a fit of rage, likely because she was planning to leave him. The brutal nature of the crime and his violent history painted a clear picture of how he had manipulated and controlled her before ultimately killing her. Anwar was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison for the death of Fawziyah Javed. Fawziyah Javed's tragic death has sparked conversations about domestic abuse and the need for better support systems for people in abusive relationships. Her family has become outspoken advocates for victims of domestic violence, calling for more awareness of warning signs and for individuals in abusive relationships to seek help. The case has raised important questions about coercive control and the devastating consequences of domestic abuse, especially for those who are trying to leave an abuser. Fawziyah Javed's disappearance and subsequent murder is a heartbreaking example of the dangers faced by victims of domestic abuse. Despite the love and support of her family and friends, Fawziyah's life was tragically cut short by a partner who had manipulated and harmed her for years. Her story highlights the importance of addressing domestic violence and providing adequate resources for those who are at risk. Fawziyah's legacy continues to inspire campaigns against domestic abuse, and her death has contributed to raising awareness about the dark and often hidden issue of coercive control in relationships. Please like and subscribe if you want to hear more compilations like this. Let me know in the comments what case you'd like me to discuss or do a deep dive on. Please stay safe, have a nice sleep, and I'll be back later.